Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to Masechtas Avodah Zarah daf Chav Gimel. We are going to begin on the very top of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, the very top line. So we saw a contradiction, a stira, between a Mishnah and the Mishnah and our Brisa. The Mishnah says, "Ein ma'amidin behema mipnei shechashudin." So a person is not allowed to bring your animal into an inn that belongs to a akum, and the reason is because we were concerned of revia. We're concerned of cohabitation. So you can't bring this animal of yours into their stable, because again they may misuse the animal. Yet the Brisa told us that loichin mehen behema, you're allowed to go and buy their animal, and therefore you're not chayshish. That maybe there's a possibility that the akum used it in this way, as that we saw the ein chayshin l'mishum roiva v'loy mishum nirva, etc. So in yesterday's daf we gave one of the three answers, and the answer we said is when it comes to their own animal, like by buying an animal from them, we're not afraid that they're going to engage in inappropriate behavior with that animal, because it'll cause the animal to either become sterile or to lose value. However, the chashash of our Mishnah is because it's our animal, and they will potentially do something with that animal. That was answer number one. We'll continue with answer number two. Ravina Omer lo kasha holachatchil hadiavad. L'chatchila, says Rashi, mahadu etzrutim astis and braysid ol el. Well, chashidi. We are chayshin. So then, if that's the case, we understand our Mishnah. However, masnisin l'chatchil katani din ma'amidin mishum dilma ravala. The Mishnah is telling us that l'chatchil should do it. However, b'diavad, after the fact, if you did buy it, then we're not going to be chayshish. So manat tamar dishani bein l'chatchil ben diavad. How do we know that we actually make a distinction? I mean, it sounds like a good answer, but how do you see that this is a true distinction? Did not, because our Mishnah says like this: Lotus yachad ishi mahen. Also, women should not be secluded with these people, midnei shechashudin al harayos, because we're concerned of how they will mistreat our women. Or minhu, frak the Gemara, but it says elsewhere, ha'isha shenichbesha b'nei Avodah Kachavim. So let's say you have a woman that was taken in captivity by Avodah Kachavim. So it depends. That if she was taken because she owed money to them, then she's going to be mutter to her husband. However, if she was taken because she was going to be sentenced to death, so they're going to consider her like hefker, and therefore, if she ever is somehow freed, so then she's usher to the husband because of her being violated. It's probably that's the distinction between l'chatchila and b'diavad. So l'chatchila, again, our Mishnah says we don't want her to be secluded, but b'diavad we're not afraid, and therefore alidei mamin she's mutul ba'al. How do we know that that's how you interpret this? Maybe even b'diavad you're also not allowed to purchase this animal, and also you should not have her secluded with this man. Maybe the only reason why she can go back to her husband is because the person who is holding her wants his money. So the husband, upon finding out that maybe she was violated, will end up not redeeming her or anything. So therefore they'll end up losing financially. Says Rashi, have some mom to summer ilnola suluparali balamidi. And this doesn't mean that the husband wouldn't do this, but it means that the akum may think, you know what, if I violate her, there's a better chance that he's not going to redeem her and get her back, and therefore he's going to lose out on money. So maybe for financial reasons he's not going to do it. Teda. V'su loy meidi. Says Rashi, the proof, the mishum hesen mamanhu desharila. The only reason why is because of money, because it's clear that it's only because it's alidei maman she's mutter. Alidei nefashos, no. Alma says Rashi, heicha. Dul mirsas lahafsin mamayno. If it's not because of a loss of money, then afkuri mafkula. She's treated like hefker. V'chashinan shaman nibula le'echemehen beratzain. That's the key word, by the way, because certainly we know outside of a kohen, Yisrael is mutter to her, to his wife, even if she was in fact with this man, but if it was b'oinus, against her will. It's only when it's beratzain it becomes an issue. So that's the explanation. Or Rashi says maybe we're talking about Eishes Kayin, and it's even talking about an Oinus, but the Iker is probably the Rishon. Okay. So that is, anyway, going back to our question, that's a second answer. One is, it depends whose animal it belongs to, and the second one is one's l'chachil, one's b'yad. And now we have our third and final answer. Rabbi Padasai Melukasha Rabbi Lezer Harabana. It's actually totally on a machlokes between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi. What's that? Did not. Gabi paras chatas. When it comes to the din of a paraduma, when it comes to the din of a paraduma, Rabbi Lezer Oimer Enu nikachas min of kachavim v'chachamim matirin. Shaila is, are you allowed to buy a paraduma directly from an oived kachavim or not? So apparently this is a machlokes. So ma'ila b'hakamivgi. Rabbi Lezer savar chashin lo revia, Rabbanan savar chashin on lo revia. The question is, are you chayish that they may have done something with this animal? Maybe they are not chayish, but maybe it's a different reason. It has nothing to do with revia. V'halcha hadu tayim with Rabbi Lezer k'Rabbi Yehuda. I'm a Rab. Yeah, Rabbi Yehuda, I'm a Rab. Haniach lehen oida shel tzakin pasla. If you were to put many empty sacks which are tied together, the animal now becomes posel as a paraduma, because the pasuk says asher lo olah aleha, that there was never an ol, a yoke on it, and therefore even something not so significant like a bunch of empty sacks, that would be enough to posel it. But about gola, when it comes to the din of egla rufa, doesn't have the same din. It's ad shetimshach ba. It's not going to posel it just by putting a yoke on it, but it's only when it actually is hauling things, moving things, because the pasuk there says asher lo moshcha ba'oil. So it has a different lashon, so therefore we're not as strict when it comes to egla rufa. So here we have a bigger concern. Did the Akum use this paraduma for his own work? So lo savadartam. Hashem nicha porta lo masituva. Hachanami. So the reality is, you can't say that the reason is because of these bundles, because if you have an animal that you know is worth millions of dollars because the paraduma is so precious, you're not going to use it. You're going to set it aside. You're not going to have the potential just to save a couple of bucks by using this animal to do some menial, simple work. Now all of a sudden you're going to end up losing millions of dollars. No, you're not going to do it. So no one's going to be chayish that. So maybe the machlokus also shouldn't be based on revia, because he's going to withhold himself from having relations with this animal, because if people find out that it happens, there'll be a puzzle. Whereas this, no, hasam yitzra taikvo. Again, it's possible that's a machlokus, because maybe he just has the Yetzer Hara, and even though it's a great financial loss, he just can't control himself, and he may end up doing it anyway. So therefore, vade taima mishum revia, who as Rashi says, maybe they're not chayish. The reason why Rabbi Lezer is of the opinion when it comes to the paraschatas that you can't purchase from an akum is the Tani Shila Maitam Rabbi Lezer Dabrel Bnei Yisrael v'yichol lecha. So it says Bnei Yisrael will be engaged in purchasing it, the paraduma, which is mashma Bnei Yisrael yichuvena v'chavim yichu. So you can only buy it from them, right? So that is certainly the question. Okay. So lo sagadat the tani seifa, because what does it say in the seifa? So it can't be totally on the pasuk by Parduma, because Rabbi Lezer has the same invalidation to purchase any carbon from an akum. Now, I can understand. So, what is the reason? Okay, fine, you can give that answer, but that only makes sense by Parduma. But we see that Rabbi Lezer holds the same thing when it comes to other karbanos. But there's no pasuk that says B'nai Yisrael v'yikoy lecha regarding regular karbanos. So again, it must be the machlokes reveal. The Dilmad kan lo plig Rabbana lehad Rabbi Lezer, as we continue to Chav Gimel Mabez, El Para de Dami Yikarim. Maybe they only argue when it comes to the Parduma because it's so valuable. Says Rashi, maybe he will hold back his Yetzer Hara, and therefore you could buy the Parduma from the Akum. But maybe when it comes to other karbanos, the Chachamim will agree to Rabbi Lezer, you can't buy any karbanos from an Akum because we're Chayish Revia. When it says you could purchase from them a behema for a carbon, money, so if you tell me that even the Rabbanan and Gidu Rabbi Lezer when it comes to Shar Karbanos, then who is that opinion like? Oh, furthermore, Tanya Behedi, we learned explicitly, my oisivule chavroi Rabbi Lezer, what did his colleagues respond to Rabbi Lezer? Kol tzoyin keder yikbatzucha ya'alu ratzoyin al mizbochi. So, what exactly is this saying? Says Rashi. Kodshim is fine. That basically it says all sheep are gathered to you l'ratzoyin al mizbochi. So what is this? So this is actually a pasuk in Yeshaya that you can gather up all these sheep, right? Al ratzain mizbachi, and it'll be put on the mizbeach. So it's mashma that it's something which is allowed. You could gather up there and take their animals. Okay. So again, so far we've answered question 6. That we have 3 answers, and that's how we're saying that either our Mishnah is when we're talking about our animals, we are chayish that of Revia, or our Mishnah is l'chatchila, or alternatively, we can say our Mishnah is based on the machlokas of Rabbi, and the Bryce is the machlokas of Rabbi Lezer and the Rabbanan regarding Parduma, and it could also it also is referring to Shar Karbanos. Now, ad kan lo plegi el b'chashasha. Up until now, the whole dispute is only if we suspect the akum. We're not sure though; it's not clear. However, if we know with certainty that he did cohabit, then this animal is definitely pasul as a carbon. So Shema Mina, the part kachim is be'achi. The Zarah that the Parduma has the status of kachim is be'ach. Says Rashi, Din kedushas mizbeach yesh lohen livsol b'revia. Well, in Padiyah, when it comes to redemption, that when you redeem it, when it comes to a carbon which is kedushas mizbeach, the din is that when it comes to kachim mizbeach, the din is that if you wish to be paid it, you have to wait until it grazes and develops a mum before you're able to be paided. Even though, of course, the paraduma is not actually we're not makrib the paraduma on the mizbeach. Nonetheless, maybe it still has the same status. If it only has the kedusha of bedek of the upkeep, something which is designated for kedusha's bedek like stones or something, it's not possible revia. So the fact that the paraduma is possible revia must be it has upon itself the status of kach mizbeach. Now shani para, this is part of the habamina, the chat is karechmana, that the Torah actually calls it a chat. This is Rashi. Oilam gabi pediyav amda v'haracha din kachi bedekabayas oleha. The truth is, you don't have to wait for it to develop a mum. The din is that it has the status of kachi bedekabayas. Umihu, or inin psulin, regarding to becoming apostles, sagya milsa suli b'sul dechatas karachmana lemei nida chatasi. But when it comes to this status, even though again, according to regarding Padiyah and Hamada, it's considered like bedekabayas. But again, regarding pasoling it, like Revia, that will say it does have the status of Kachim Mizbeach because the pasuk says Chat. El Miato, if that's true, that we're giving it that status, then Tifs will be a Daifin. Then we should also say a Pardumas Pasol if it was born in a non-natural birth, like for C-section, cesarean. So that's a Yoyte Daifin. That may be taka because the Yoyte Daifin is Pasol as a carbon. So that's true also by Parduma. Hachinami, if that's true, what we learn, it says that if you're makdish to a Parduma, Yoyte Daifin, it's Pasol. Rav Shimon Makshir. Now Rav Shimon actually holds it is okay. Now Vechitim Rav Shimon Tamei, Yoyte Daifin, Vlad Malyahu, he actually holds that it's a Vlad Malya, which is brought down in Masechtas Nida. Rashi quotes, Yoyte Daifin, Ein Yoshvin Alav Yemei Tuma. You actually don't sit the days of Tuma or Yemei Tahara when it comes to a cesarean. Ben Chayevin Alav carbon Leida, there's no chi of carbon. Now Shimon Omer Harihu Kiyoyul. He says, no, it's not true. When you, even though it's a natural birth, nonetheless you still have all the dinim of Tuma, Tahira, etc. V'yeshlo Tuma Shiva, Lozachu, Shvaim, Nekeva, Cheni Meitar, carbon. So Rav Shimon holds when it comes to a individual who gives birth, Yoyte Daifin through cesarean, the din is as he holds that takid is like a regular birth, and therefore all the dinim apply. The Chitem Rav Shimon Tamid Yom Yoyte Daifin Vlad Malyahu Av Yom Rav Yochanan Maida Hayu Rav Shimon Inin Kodshim Sheinu Kadosh. Not necessarily when it comes to a carbonite. Says Rashi the Behema Yoyte Derech Daifin Psula carbon. So that's only when it comes to a woman giving birth in this cesarean manner. Or of an animal, whichever way that it became, it produced a new offspring as Yoyte Daifin, it doesn't have that status. So we see that even no one holds like this. Even the Shita of Rav Shimon would hold that it's possible Yoyte Daifin, and therefore when it comes to carbonis. And therefore, the question is, how about when it comes to a paraduma? El shani para hoyel mum paisel ba davar erba Avodah Zarah nami possible. Since we know a mum is enough to passel it from being a paraduma, so too, therefore, the din is that any erba like revia, or if it was used for Avodah Zarah, will also pass. Because there was corruption in them and there was a blemish. Whenever you have that language of corruption or destruction, which is quoted in Parshas Noach, the whole world's destroyed, which is referring to Ereva, the way that they engaged in inappropriate behavior during the time of the Mabul, pre-Mabul. So we see that when it comes to hashchasa, it's referring to these things. So that's the answer. Question 7. So it's true. It's only Kadesh Abayas, but since the pasuk says Ki mashchasam b'hem mumbam, and made iskish hashchasa lumum, and the word hashchasa is written next to a blemish, we say kol the paisel bo mum, paisel bo hashchasa, dahainu davar erba b'avodah zarah. So we know a paraduma cannot have any blemish; it has to be tamim, even though it's not brought as a carbon on the mizbeach. It still takes upon itself the dinim that it cannot have a mum, and it also therefore can't have hashchasa, which means it can't be an animal which has Revia. But it doesn't mean that, again, it's considered to be Kachim Mizbeach. Okay. TA5. Madua Revia Pasos Bapar Duma Afilu Shihi Kachim Bedechabayis Bahavamina Maskana. So they make you say the Havamina. The Havamina is because it says Chatos Maskana Hoyu Mum Poiselba Vixiv Mashchisim Ba Mum Bum. Okay. It's a lot of stuff to have to remember. And let's see if I got that right on TB6. Exactly the same question. I wrote like this. This is what I wrote. Bahavamina mitoich shehu nikra kodesh kikadshim. It's actually not called kodesh. It's called chatas. Nikra chatas. Right. That's the reason. It says the chatas kari rachmana. Umaskana mitoich shapara duma nifselas b'mum avodah zarah v'gilui rayis nikras toeva le'inyan zeh. I'm going to write the word hashchasa, when in zeh apostle as hapara raya b'psukim. Okay, I didn't remember what pasuk was, obviously. All right, unless it's 30 blot, it's not easy to memorize every pasuk in every sugya. Okay, hopefully I'll get that right next time. All right, so the Gemara continues like this. Gufa. Let's get back to what we were speaking about before. Tani Shila my tam Rabbi Lezer Dechsev Dabro Bnei Yisrael Yichu Ba Bnei Yisrael Yichu Ve'eno V'Chachamim Yichu. So you're not allowed to buy, certainly not the Parduma, and perhaps at least when it comes near the Parduma, from an Akum. An Akum you cannot buy. Has to be from a Yid. El Miyata, if that's true, as we said, Dabro Bnei Yisrael Yichu Truma Hachanam Bnei Yisrael Yichu Ve'eno V'Chachamim Yichu. That only Jews are able to give gifts, right? Truma doesn't mean necessarily the produce, but it means in general that only Jews can sell items for the use of the Mishkan. So the Chitem Achinami, V'yem Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, and this way have the famous Gemara in Masechtas Kedushin, which should immediately have popped in people's minds at the beginning of the sugya. Sholos Rabbi Lezer. He asked the kasha to him, how far do you have to honor your parents? So he said, I'll tell you the story. I'll tell you about this particular Ovid Kachavim, and I'm going to translate him as an idol worshiper, what he did in Ashkelon. Oh, by the way, V'dama ben Nesina Shemai. His name was Dama ben Nesina, which is the word Nesina means a giver. His father was a giver. So they needed, and this is part of the problem, they needed precious stones for the ephod, for the Kohen Gadol, one of the garments that he wears, b'shishim ravu schar, and they were willing to pay 10,000 dinarim worth of money for this. Rav Kahana Masli b'shmainim ravua, maybe it was even 10,000. Maftachot munachas tachas mirashaisav shel aviv loy tzara. I mean, I probably would have been very angry when I woke up if my son didn't wake me up. But apparently he knew that his father wanted to sleep, and the key was underneath his pillow. And it's an interesting thing. Why would you hide a key underneath the pillow? Probably because the father was makbid that no one should be able to open up the safe. But he didn't wake up his father, and that shows the great level of kavod that this person had for his father. And we should certainly, we're mitzvah, we're certainly mechuyev to do the mitzvah, as it's in the Aser Sedimros, but it's not one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which is interesting why, but it's not. Nonetheless, he did it, so we certainly should be extremely careful. It's a beautiful story, but it's a kasha, because we see that we were willing to purchase this for the Mishkan, for the Kohen Gadol. Avnei Shayam Hisaka Inyan. So the answer is Avnei Shayam breaks up the pasuk. Says Rashi, but the Luksiv Avnei Shayam Kinechsiv B'Kuhu B'Kesav Nechashos Chelos V'Argoan V'Oros hifsik inyan lokoi of a yikhu. So basically, when it says v'yikli truma, it's excluding this. This was allowed. So understand it has a vav over there, which is a vav achibor. So that apparently it should be included, and it shouldn't be allowed. But Katani Seifel. What's the rest of the story? We forgot the rest of the story. L'shana Cheres, the following year, Novel Paraduma. This guy, this Akum, had a Paraduma. Be'edra in his flock. Nichzu Chachmei Yisrael Atzolem Elhem Yodea Ni B'chem. Shima Ni B'vakesh Mikem Kol Mamash Ba'olam Atem Nicely. I know that this is the most valuable thing in the world, and there's only, I guess, maybe one that exists. I was Zaycha that is born in my flock, and I could ask you for all the money in the world. I'm only going to ask for the money that I lost because of my father. And obviously the stories are interesting, like they couldn't have waited like a few hours, like I guess maybe they were able to find someone else with a stone. But we see clearly that you're allowed to purchase a paraduma from an akum. So what exactly is he arguing about? And the fact that the bigger problem is the pasuk seems clear. It says Daber b'nei Yisrael v'yichli the paraduma. So my answer is over here. The reason why it was allowed was Hasam al yedei Tigri Yisrael Zov. The reason is, and we're going to stop with this, is that there was a middleman that was going to buy first from the akum, but still you're not allowed to buy from him directly. So this whole story, these guys were not the ones who were actually going to buy it and then immediately give it. They were like the middleman. They would have bought it from the akum, and then someone would have bought it from them. So they were like almost like a business dealers. Question 8. Paras chatas or belezer oimer enu nichas min akum mehem beis tamim shomer b'shitas Rabbi Lezer v'ketz lochu par medama benasina, etc. So Rabbi Lezer is chayash ravia, and therefore that's the reason why we don't want you to purchase a paraduma. However, the par of dama benasina Yisrael hayu mishamrim oisav es ima. So we didn't see this part, but apparently someone was watching this animal the entire time. L'shila islay mikra de b'nei Yisrael yichel below akum uparid the dama benasina ali the sirsur Yisrael wakfu. Again, there was a middleman, and that's the reason why we were lenient when it came to him. Let's see if there's another question. Ad time.